It's Taylor. I'm a financial coach, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a budget inside Monarch Money that is going to help you achieve your goals and pay off credit card debt. So there is a goal feature in Monarch Money that you've probably seen, you've probably played around with a little bit, and we're going to really dive into how to use that properly when you're creating a budget inside Monarch Money. It can be a little tricky. This is why I suggest doing this very last in your budgeting process. So if you haven't watched the prior videos in this series of getting started with Monarch Money, we've taken you from getting your account set up to adding your accounts, creating categories, and really just everything you need to do before you start creating a budget. And then after that is also then when you add goals and you start playing with a goal feature and start talking about your savings goals and paying off credit card debt and that kind of thing. So let's dive into it, and I'll show you how to use these features. So last time we talked about how to create your budget, what it means when you have a negative here left to budget. That means we have overassigned income. We have budgeted $5,010 of income. We've assigned every single dollar a job inside this column right here in the side the budget column down all the way through these expenses. Every single dollar has been assigned, but we have overassigned. You have created a budget that is $15 over. And this is a problem because we also have goals that we're trying to meet. I don't want to be just spending what I make. I want to be saving for my emergency fund, paying off credit card debts, saving for retirement goals. Like, these are all goals that we need to also be adding into Monarch, because your categories do not reflect these goals. These are all expense categories. Outgoing to a third party, these are expense things, not budgeting for necessarily savings. And so, like long-term savings or savings for goals. Now, there's a couple situations where that's not totally the case, and that's where the rollover feature comes in. For example, you could be saving for a goal for travel, and you could be putting $500 a month here. And that's one way to save for your goals if they're related to an expense, because travel is something that is related to a expense. But things like an emergency fund, you probably wouldn't want to put a category here because it's not necessarily expense related to that. Normally what comes out of emergency fund is car maintenance or medical expense, right? So those kinds of savings aren't necessarily related here. But you can also, you can also use goals for like stuff like travel and vacation. There's two ways to do it. You can either do it this way or through goals. So I'm going to show you the goals way to do it today. If you want to do it this way, you'll have to watch the video on the sinking funds and what that's all about. You don't want to do both, and I'll show you why in just a little bit, but you want to pick one or the other. If you're going to save for a goal here, great. You do not need to create a goal then for travel also. That's not necessary. Or I'll just show you. So first off, the thing with goals is that it is something you really need to understand is that a goal is connected to a account. And so if your accounts are not feeding transactions, we can't really use goals with that account for about half the features of goals. There's half the features where it doesn't matter if something is feeding or not. And what I mean by feeding is if you click on any of your accounts, let's say you're looking at your 401k, if you scroll down, you're going to see no transactions. It's because it's not feeding transactions. Now, you can get transactions from this. It's in beta as far as your investment accounts. I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to show you every single dividend, interest, charge, buy, sell, whatever. It's going to clutter your transaction feed. It's not worth it. You don't need it. You're not budgeting your 401k money, so don't put it in your budget. So don't turn on transactions here. I wouldn't anyway. Some people want to see that, so that's totally fine. Like for your brokerage account, maybe that's something you're budgeting with. But your mortgage, also very common to not have transactions in a mortgage, a loan. And so we can't really use goals for things that are not feeding transactions, except for just the ability to track, hey, I'm here with the pay down. I want to be at 100,000 with the pay down. How far am I on track? Am I close to getting this paid off? We can see balances. You can track your goal balances, but you will not be tracking your goal transactions with those things. And so let's just dive into me showing you how this is actually going to work. So first off, I've created a couple goals, and you can do that by going to add goals, clicking on whatever goal you want. So I'm going to add a savings goal, another savings goal. And I added the credit card goal, and that's normally the only one I actually use with most of my clients. I don't normally bother with these ones because I think you can see how far you are with your mortgage just by looking at the balance. You can see you still have $250 left. I don't really necessarily think you need a goal for it. And we can't really budget for extra payments this way because we already have categories for this. Remember how we talked about if you have a category like travel and vacation, you don't want to also be budgeting as a goal for travel and vacation, then you'd be double budgeting. So same with this thing. If you're going to make extra payments to your student loans, just put it in the expense category for student loans. You don't need to make a goal for it. So when you create the goals, it's going to ask you how to prioritize them. So if you have different priorities for it, great, move these around. You can change the name of these, change the image, whatever you need to do. This is asking how much total you want to save for. So if you have targets, so let's say I have a target of a $50,000 emergency fund. That's might be a little much for some people, might be low for some people. Your emergency fund is very dependent on you. So don't take that as advice. We're going to set this one as an example, $50,000. And then maybe I have some home repairs that I want to do of $10,000. Maybe I want to take a vacation for a big vacation. We're going big. We're going to go 25,000 for my vacation. And then maybe some other savings goals. Of course, you would want to name these. Don't leave it as just savings. Make sure you change the name of them. But then the next thing we're going to do is add your accounts. Now, I've already done this for some of these, but what you're going to do is click on add accounts. And for me, in this demo account, I am using my joint account for all of my goals. So in this case, because I just added a new savings account, I don't have anything available to assign because all of my savings in my joint account has already been assigned to all of my other goals. And so I'm going to say I actually don't want to have. So this is where I talk about how the balances work with goals. If you want to use goals in Monarch to track your balances, this is perfect because what's going to happen is now that I've taken money out of a goal, I have some available for this new goal and I'm going to use it. And when I use it, it's also going to tell me, hey, from your joint savings, you're also budgeting 48 for emergency or for savings and your vacation. This is where the rest of your joint savings is going right now. And this is awesome because if you say deposit $1,000 into that joint account, if you go to the goal section, Monarch is going to say, hey, you have new money to assign. Do you want to assign it to a goal? And you can absolutely do that. And so it's good to track balances really, really well. It's awesome. It does that really well. And so it also helps you create buckets with one savings account. So if you don't have the bucket feature, like, if you're using Ally, you have buckets as an example. You can take your savings account and put it into like home repair, savings, vacation, emergency fund. You can do that in your bank accounts, but some people don't have that, or you just don't want to create that. You can actually create buckets and be able to track how much of your savings account you're actually going to use for each of these goals so far. And that way every job in that savings account now has a purpose and it's visualized inside of Monarch Money. So that's a really, really useful thing. For your credit cards, you're going to add either a goal for each credit card, or you're going to add all your credit cards to one goal. Either way, totally up to you. For this case, there's only one credit card, so I'm going to put one credit card here, but you could totally put a lot more there. Now, when it asks you how much to allocate to each of your goals, don't put anything here because we're still creating your budget, and as we started, there was a deficit in the budget, so there really isn't money necessarily to put towards goals just yet. But if you know how much needs to go to goals, you're like, I have to get this, like it must happen no matter what, like go ahead and put that dollar amount in there. Same with credit cards. If you know at least the minimum payment, so the minimum is always what you're going to at least do. At the very minimum, you're going to be putting that. So if you know the minimum payments, put that in the credit card goal, but don't put your necessarily the extra just yet. We can change that later once we figure out your budget. So now that I've got the goals set up, what I'm going to do is show you what this looks like. So first off, this is what I meant by the buckets and the visual and the board. So I know I've assigned every single dollar a job for my joint savings account. So I have a visual of where my savings is. It doesn't just look like a big fat sum, like 50,000 doesn't tell me anything, but now I can go into goals and say, oh, here's what we have. And so when I decide I want a trip, I know exactly how much of my savings I can safely use and still know that I have money set aside for everything else. So that's a huge value add for this. You can do the same thing with your mortgage if you just want to see like a balance tracker. You can totally do that. But what you're not going to do with like the mortgage and the loans and all that stuff is, and this is completely optional for all goals, in fact, is showing what's going to happen inside your actual spend right here. If you do a very specific thing here that I'm going to show you right now, you'll be able to see actual. But if you aren't feeding transactions like from your mortgage, you're never going to see actual here. And so it's not necessary when you have a goal. Like, you don't have to budget for it. You could leave these all blank. You do not have to necessarily budget for these. If you're just trying to track balances, cool, use goals for that. You do not have to use the budget feature. But in this case, we do. We're trying to create a budget so we can pay off some credit card debt. So I know that I want to be putting at least $500 towards my credit card. And then I also know that I want to right now prioritize more money going to vacation, because my vacation is going to be awesome. So we have the money set aside. Now we're saying, hey, we don't have enough money to do this at this point. This is not going to happen. So we would need to go through here, each of these categories line by line, and see where can we cut back or where can you increase income. So that's the next step, is do that. Figure out how you can make this work. You want this to be 0. So go through, determine like, hey, maybe you can spend less in areas that mean less to you, that are not as valuable to you. Maybe clothing isn't as big of a value to me as travel, so I'm going to reduce that. Same with everything else. But make sure you have a plan. Remember, we talked about last video, do not set a budget lower than your average unless you have a really clear plan of how you're actually going to make that happen. If you don't have a clear plan, then it's just not going to work for you. So then you're just numbers on a spreadsheet, and that's where most people are jumping between spreadsheets, because it is just numbers on a sheet and they're just, throwing in a number because they just want this to work. Well, that's not realistic. We can't just make the numbers work. We have to make sure real life works. If you're not capable of actually, if you don't have the time, if you're a working professional and you have kids and all this stuff, maybe you don't have time to meal prep to the extent that you need to, don't reduce your grocery budget. See if you can reduce something else, or again, increase income. So now that we've done that, we're going to keep working on trying to make this all work, and I would cut out some expenses. In this case, I'm just going to take on another job because I just want that vacation so bad and I don't want to reduce lifestyle. So I'm going to bring in some more money. That's the cheat way to do it, and it's a great way to do it if you can do that. So let's say my business is bringing in money. It's going to allow me to save for that amount, and so now I'm in the green again. I can assign the 35 somewhere else or just be in the green. So now I have enough room for this. So let's say I actually go to make that transfer. If I were to go to my transactions, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when you transfer money to your savings account. So I move money from my checking account. So it's $1,000 leaving my checking account, which is why it's in the black, and then $1,000 received in my joint account. That's why there's 2 transactions, one outgoing, one is being received. Now, you'll notice both of these are labeled as transfer. This was for my travel fund. If I were budgeting for my travel in this capacity right here, let's say I chose this method instead of goals. We're doing that one instead of goals, so I'm going to actually take this out, and we're going to just budget for goals. I would not do anything else with that transaction. So I guess I'm budgeting $1,000 for travel, right? There's $1,000 in this bucket now. It's saying there's $1,000 there. If I were to mark that transfer as travel, because hey, I moved that to my travel, right? Doesn't that mean that it's part of my travel budget? That was me putting money into that savings for travel. And this is the same for like taxes. If you're saving money for taxes, you put it in your tax savings account. What's going to happen? Well, if I go look at my travel budget, and now it's going to show that I've spent $1,000 in travel last month. That's when the transaction came out. That's not the case, right? I budgeted 1,000 and I spent 1,000 and now I have zero in my travel budget. That would not be correct. We do not do anything with the transfers between savings accounts when you're budgeting for your savings here. So if you're budgeting for your property taxes or your home improvement and you're moving $1,000 into your home improvement budget, if you're budgeting for it here, everything is just going to show up as a transfer. I'm going to find that $1,000 expense again. It's going to show up as a transfer and you're going to leave it as a transfer, and that is it, nothing else. But if you're using goals, you're going to do the same thing. It's going to still be a transfer because that is what it is, and it always will be. There's never a situation where this will not going to be labeled as transfer, because money moving between accounts is a transfer. But if you click on this arrow right here, we're going to attach this to the goal. This is money that is for my travel goal. I'm going to attach to the goal. Now, I can't attach this one because this is not connected to my goal. This is not an account that's connected to that goal. Remember, we connected the savings account to the goal. So make sure whatever account is connected to the goal is what you're attaching it to. So in this case, I'm going to attach it to my savings goals. I can attach it to any of these goals. Notice I could not do that if I clicked on the transaction that came from my checking account, because the checking account is not attached to the goal. So in this case, I'm going to attach this to the goal. The category stays the same. It is not changing. It's always a transfer, but the goal does. So if I go to my budget and I'm looking at May, because this happened in May, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to see that actually show up. I've moved $1,000. I have successfully moved the money. We're good. And that is the only place right here. This column right here is the only place where transfers between accounts, your savings, will show up. We do not want your savings to show up here. Otherwise, it's counted as expense, and that would not be correct when you run a cash flow report and you're, how much did I spend this year? That would be very wrong, right? If you're putting $1,000 a month and you're marking it as an expense, then you're going to show that you spent $12,000 a year on travel, right? That's not the case. You actually saved that much money for travel. So I just really want to stress that, because that's a really important thing with goals. That this is the only place where your transfers can show up. Now, if you're lazy like me, and you have a lot of goals here, so let's say you have 500 here, you have 300 here, and you want to put another 400 into emergency fund. So that's my $1,000 being budgeted for. Oh, too much. Can't do math. That's my $1,000 being budgeted for. I only move this 1,000 once. I don't make 3 transfers to my joint savings account every month. I make 1 transfer. So there's a couple things you can do. One is you don't worry about it. One is you don't have to connect stuff to the goal. This is completely optional. It does not affect your budget, your transfers, your cash flow. There is absolutely no effect to this plan and what you do if you decide not to attach expenses to the goal. The point, though, is that you still need to be budgeting for it. So the actual column is what I'm saying is the actual column just doesn't really matter. You want to budget for it. You want to make sure that you actually move the money. You want to make sure that actually I go in and submit the transfer. Like, that still needs to happen. But whether or not it shows up in actual does not matter. But if you want it to, and you only do 1 transfer a month, the solution here is to split this. So you would split this this transaction into 3 different transactions. They're all still transfers. So every single one would still be a transfer because it's still moving money between accounts. And I'd add one more for the other account. Awesome. All right, now I'm going to split that into 3 transactions, and now I can attach each of those to the goal. And where did they go? They're not here anymore because that is searching for 1,000. So we're going to look for those transfers. Found them. Okay, so now I can transfer to each of these goals. So maybe this one went to my savings, this one went to, I can't remember which one I sent to which, but we're going to assign this one to the emergency fund. And then this one to travel. I don't remember. It was just 2 seconds ago, but that's okay. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the budget. I'm going to go look at May because this is when this all happened. I'm going to scroll all the way down, and here we go. Now everything's looking great. Wow, I got it correct. Everything's matching. The transfers happened. We're all good. Again, is not necessary. It's just for like the aesthetically pleasing, like, hey, I really want these to actually show that I made the transfer, which is awesome. Because now if you go into your goals, if I go into vacation, it's actually going to show me, hey, look, you contributed in May. I don't care for this. I just care about the balance. So that's why I don't really worry about making sure the transfers show up in my goals. But if you do, if you want to see how much you contribute to each goal, it's very satisfying. So I do recommend, like, I mean, it is very nice. If you did that for every single transfer, it's awesome. So if you can do that, it helps you make sure, like, it keeps you accountable to making sure that you've stuck to your budget, that you've made the transfers, and that everything was fine. Okay, so credit cards is also a tricky one. So credit cards here, this is also just going to be your extra payments. So first off, with credit cards, you have to stop using them. Like, you really have to stop using them if you're carrying a balance. The interest that you are getting charged is not is way higher than the amount of points you are earning. Your points are not compounding. You earn points once on the one transaction, you're good. Your credit card interest is compounding. And so unless you're really, really diligent about making sure you pay off what you put on that month and making your extra credit card payment, then fine. I guess it's fine if you do that. But it can make it really tricky. Monarch's not very good at budgeting with credit card debt, especially if you're using the credit cards. If you're not using credit cards, it's great. It's perfect. Monarch works great. If you're also using the credit cards, it can get a little tricky. So I'm going to show you what it looks like with credit cards. First off, I'm going to set the goal for how much I'm trying to pay off on the credit card. So if I'm trying to make, so this is not including what I'm putting on it. Okay, I was going to assume that you were putting nothing on the card, because that's what you're going to start doing because you watched this video and you're like, Taylor's right, I'm not going to use my credit card if I'm carrying a balance. So now that you've decided that, you're only making payments on going towards the actual balance, not to pay off what you put on. So let's say I'm putting $500 a month on my credit card, or that's the goal. That's the goal anyway. Something that I want to do is make sure that all of my credit card payments are being tied to this goal. So I'm going to go to my transactions. I'm going to filter for all my credit card payments, and notice my credit card payments are in the transfer section. That is correct to do. Leave it there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit all of the, oh, and you know what else I'm going to do? Just make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to filter by account, and I'm going to filter by my credit card. Okay, so now all the receiving credit cards payments are what I want attached to the goal. So I'm going to edit multiple. I'm going to click all of them. And you can set up a rule to do this as well. So this does it going forward. You can do it one and done. I'm going to attach all of these to my credit card goal. And then I'm going to press save. I'm going to press apply to all 5. Okay, so now that I've done that, we can see in the budget that the same thing happened as with the savings goals, is that it's actually going to show up in my budget. So I am putting aside, I spent $500. Maybe last month, I put a little bit more actually. I did $1,300. I was budgeting $500. I put $1,300 into it. Awesome if you have the money. Obviously, you would need to, you'd want to match this. And if you're in a huge deficit, it means that you really should have made sure you brought in that at least that much money extra, of course. So when you match these, make sure that the budget, is 0. So it has to come from somewhere. If it doesn't, if you still have negatives, that means that money probably went onto the credit cards, or you pulled from savings, and it's a whole mess. So make sure you actually have the money to make extra credit card payments. But yeah, they're going to show up if you go to the goals section. They're going to be there. Every single credit card payment is going to be listed. You can see how much you made in each month. Now, here's where it gets tricky. If you're putting money onto the card, just because you have, so if you have to pay off what you put on as well as what you are budgeting for, it's really hard to determine what part of the credit card payment went towards extra payments versus what you went to pay off. So if my goal for extra payments is $500, and this month I put $1,300 on the card, maybe it's because I put $800 worth of stuff on the card. So my actual progress towards my goal didn't really occur like it's saying here. And that's why it can get really tricky for Monarch to track paying off credit card debt if you're still putting stuff on it. Okay, and so here's what happens when you attach everything to the credit card. And this is what you probably don't want to do. I don't recommend doing this. But I am going to attach all of the transactions that I made on the credit card that month to show you what that looks like. Actually, I'm just going to show you one for right now. So if I attach this transaction to the goal, because like, when you spend money on the card, you're going backwards on your goal. You are no longer making progress towards the goal. You just put 150 on the card. And so if we go back to the goals now, we're going to see that in the credit card section, we'll see a red here, and it's actually showing pets as part of your goal. And so it can show you what your net difference is, what you put on the card versus what you paid off, and that will help you determine, what if you're actually making progress on your credit card. However, the bad news is that now it's trying to get you to move the money that you budgeted for pets. So if I was budgeting 150 for pets, it's trying to get you to move that money out of here to your credit card, but it doesn't really do a good job of reminding you to do this, and it's not very helpful because now when you look in your budget, you're like, hey, I didn't spend anything on pets, which is very incorrect because right here we can see June 11th there was pets. It's part of your expenses, but in your budget it's trying to tell you, hey, you're not going to budget for pets anymore. You actually need to budget for your credit card payment, but it's not very good at telling you that. So I don't recommend attaching transactions to your credit cards because then it doesn't show up in your budget. Now remember, it always will still show up in your cash flow. It's still going to show me that I spent 150 for pets that month, as well as whenever you pull a cash flow report. It's just for that month's budget, not so much, and that's a big problem. So again, if you're using your credit card, this is just going to be really complicated. The other thing that you can do, though, if you really insist on not listening to Taylor and still using your cards while you're trying to pay it off, is you can run a report on just that credit card for that month, so you know exactly how much you need to pay off what you put on, as well as make that extra payment. So if I wanted to look at just last month, I'm going to use the filter to just look at what I put on the card. So I'm only clicking that card, and then I'm, making sure all my categories are available. This is saying I put $23.83 on the card. So now I know my payment needs to be $23.83 and an extra $500. And so then this will show me the remaining difference will be that $23.83, because you'll put $23.83 plus $500 in order to actually make progress. If you don't do that, then you're just paying off what you put on. Your interest is piling up. You're getting charged on the interest that's piling up. So you really, really need to make sure that you're using that report to help you determine how much of a credit card payment to make. Again, not super easy in Monarch, which is why I got to stop using the cards. So I hope that was helpful. Credit cards and goals is probably the hardest thing inside Monarch Money, and I do think it's something that's easier to demonstrate in your own accounts. And so if it is something that you want help with, I offer a couple different services that you can get some assistance with understanding how to manage this and how to budget for it. I also have some workshops coming up that you got to make sure you sign up for my newsletter. Those are getting announced in like the next week or so. So make sure you sign up for the newsletter, and you can get into these workshops where you can actually get some, your questions answered. We can look at your account even to see what's going on and why you would budget the way you are in Monarch, and make sure you're budgeting correctly for your extra credit card payments or for your goals, and how to handle those transfers and transactions and the sinking funds. Like, all these questions are so much easier to show you in your own budget. So make sure you sign up to work with me in one of the capacities that I have on my website or with the newsletter. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what questions you have. If this was more confusing than helpful, let me know that too, and we'll keep building on it and we'll keep working on it. But I hope that was helpful, and thank you so much.